Would you like to comment?
Yes.
Very seldom heard you defer there, Councillor.
So, Mr. Mayor?
You seldom defer on this.
Oh, no.
Binging on the policy.
Sorry.
First, after lunch. Look at
Yeah.
that. Oh, inappropriate meeting language at the same time. Warning too.
The tree management policy, do we in particular have any comments?
Oh, I do have one.
Mm.
In section 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, last paragraph, it says there the free variety courses and uses by way of leaf fruit, bark shedding by any natural proposers should be put in there in making bat havens.
So you realise that those dot points are headed by the statement that council is unlikely to remove trees in the following circumstances.
Oh, I mean to go up to the one.
Not that I'm an expert in this matter at all. In fact, for the record, my preferred position around trees is pulling them down and poisoning them. But for the benefit of this policy, I did offer you the chair, Councillor Rogers, if you wish to, but you elected to say nothing. So you're going to have to cop whatever I deal out here for the next few minutes on this. I think you'd be suggesting, Councillor Plum, that if a tree becomes a bat roost, it would be more likely to be removed. Would that be what your intent would be? So that would actually be the paragraph
That's
above
just to deal with it. If it's in our, under our town, that it's somewhere where we deal with this tree. It's not there so that we can deal with it.
Could I suggest that without drawing attention to this and enraging the environmental lobby group and the Save the Tree Bat Prevention Society or whatever they call themselves, that dot point 2 in paragraph 4 of that same thing, that tree presents a public safety risk, could be considered a caveat for that, because bats are a public safety. I'm happy for you to spell it out.
No, I just read them. There's a couple.
It's there. Be careful because there are laws about destroying a roost.
Yeah.
We can define roost.
So if we have a policy that
Break the rules.
so
Yeah,
That was the only thing that just crossed my mind.
Councillor
Maybe the first question around the objectives, point 1. Yes, I agree with increasing the number of trees. But yeah, I have concerns about just planting trees for the sake of planting numbers of trees. I think we need to be very selective about what we do, and it references 2.3 footpaths. Trees must not be on council's prohibited street tree list. Do we have a prohibited street tree list?
An interesting choice of phrase, considering all of our Barcaldine streets are named after trees. Depending on how you interpret that phrase.
we don't, but once it's policy adopted,
We will establish one, that's right, that's fine.
Similar to Ergon has their,
Yeah, they've got a bit of a guide about.
and other councils do have them. I've got the same.
Yeah, for the couple of days that I've had to mull it over, I don't disagree with it. Probably, and maybe for the next reiteration, like the removal and replacement, like Barcaldine especially has got a lot of peltophrans and that are barely taller than me and older than me, and to be honest, all they are a pain in the footpath for anyone mowing it. Like, they probably should have been poisoned and cut out or pulled out a long time ago.
I'm the man for the job.
Yeah. They offer nothing to the amenity. They're a grizzled old tree that was probably never looked after from the day that we planted it. So some of them have they've been left on a footpath, and basically once they got this high, they were left to fend for himself.
There's a lot of footpath trees that have grown. They break through the clay level. So I was told that for bitumen they brought a lot of clay into town. Form a hard base in the streets.
There's a lot of manual play now. You go down to the three, there's a lot of play. Still seem to go okay.
These, it seems to be footpaths, aren't they?
Yeah.
They planted the tree and it grows so high, it just looks like something blocking the roots getting down.
Water mains and telephone walls. That's what's blocking the roof.
All right, so what do you want to do here, councillors? You want to manage our trees with a policy? Does this policy manage the trees for you, Councillor Plum?
I believe it does.
Would you like to move it? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Peebles. Discussion. Formula. Councillor Gleeson.
Mr Mayor, I know where the vote's going to go, but I'd just like to say that trees and footpaths, in my opinion, trees and footpaths are next. Shrubs, by all means, shrubs and bushes, but not trees on footpaths. I just want to, there's plenty of places for trees, but the footpath is a footpath, and then there's lots of footpaths around this town here that have got bike tracks, for elderly people or push bikes or whatever. Yeah. I don't like trees. I don't like what they do. It's nice to see the nice shade and that, but I don't just like to see what the trees do to our footpaths and our curb in general. Thank you.
Well, Councillor, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself for knowing where the vote's going to go on this, but I think the point you raised there is probably the exact reason why this policy like this actually required. It's not about amenity. All of my tongue-in-cheek jokes about pulling trees down and poisoning them, a lot of them are gifted in that exact mannerism. The damage they do to house yard fences alone, let alone curb and channeling and footpaths and water mains, especially, ingress. And so I think elements of this is to ensure that the proximity of them to those assets and the type of tree, I'm not going to sit here and name trees, but some trees have got a lot of surface roots that are likely to cause more substantial damage, others aren't. Some are real shallow rooted trees, like you'd hate to see, just to use a really callous example, a black wattle tree planted anywhere in communities 15 years after it's planted, it's going to blow over and wreck someone's car. They're shallow rooted, they're terrible trees, that apart from the fact that they're ugly and they stink, they also are dangerous. So, there's probably what a lot of people who understand amenity, visual amenity, already get and think why you need a policy. It's because it's not only what looks nice, it's what's going to have the impact you're talking about, whether it be on the constructed footpath, on the KNC, on the bitumen even. Plenty of examples. We don't have to walk far from this building to see the damage caused by potentially incorrect style of trees, and conversely, there can be things that can be done to the other assets to accommodate that. Like perhaps it's a tree of significance to the area, and an example of that would be the bottle tree in Maranoa Council area, specifically in Roma. Not necessarily an easy thing to contend with, but they've actually, going back to our plan, you can't move them. You can't have a development that moves the bottle tree in Roma. You've got to accommodate what you want to do in some other place because it's considered iconic. It's a landscape cultural heritage issue. So, not cultural heritage, landscape something. There's sort of name for it. They made it up, I think, but it's still there. It's real. And this is a bit of an informed process. So, if you think that there's some element of this policy that could be strengthened to accommodate your concerns, whether it's today or reading about it and amending it at some point in the future, I'd encourage you to do so. because that sort of interaction is what we want. It's not that you're against trees, but you're against damage to our infrastructure or private landowners. Anyway, I wouldn't be concerned about potentially voicing a minority concern there. I don't think it is a minority. I think probably every councillor in this room would share your concerns about damage to assets. Maybe not against cleanup, but
That would come under public safety, wouldn't it, Mr Mayor, on footpaths and that? Bitumen bubbling up or garden edges moving, that'd come under the public safety side of things, wouldn't
it does, and it's probably some of the stuff that's identified in the risk, in risk, which we received that report on this morning. It's fairly out the list, but it's still there. It's still a real threat. Correct.
Mr Mayor, so under the footpath section, that's why we've got the trees must be at least 3 metres from the fence line, so that there is access for people to walk on the footpath. Also, the prohibited tree list which will develop, so those trees will not be allowed to be planted on the footpath. There are things in the policy that I do protect.
No, I've read that. And I can understand that. I just want to have my view.
No, good on you. And like as I say, there's probably nothing stopping you amending this a bit more tightly in future. Like this is the first generation of it. You've got suggestions, or I'm sure council would welcome receipt of those amendments. Any further comments? Those in favour? 11-0.
Before you
Hang on, Dan.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I've just been asked before we go to this, I've been asked by councillors just to explain what it is around this resolution and its like that gives rise to a conflict of interest resolution situation for certain councillors. Now, bear in mind, it's not the prerogative of either the mayor or the CEO to give advice on COIs, but I'm going to anyway, perhaps at his own displeasure here. The reason a pre-qualified supplier list is the same as awarding a tender. They become effectively, each person on that list is effectively a tender. They are tendered to the Barcaldine Council for the provision of either wet or dry plant hire. That this is the execution of a tender. And then if you have a related party who is on or has applied to go on to this list, you making a decision about somebody else going on or not going on is your conflict of interest. So you can't make a decision around a tender if you have a conflict of interest, and you have a conflict of interest by way of your related party already having applied to be on this same pre-qualified supplier list. These people, by being on this pre-qualified supplier list, can shortcut the, they don't need to come to council to earn jobs. We pre-qualify our staff to use them, whether it be via vendor panel or in the case of emergent or urgent works, can go directly to them and engage them for a period of time. So we are approving them as a tenderer to council for future work, and anyone else coming onto that list, a decision if you made that from a person who has a close associate who's already on it or wanted to be on it, means that the perception is there that you have a real conflict of interest in approving that. So does that help at all?
I understand that, Mr Mayor, but one question I just wanted to ask, if I may, with the pre-approval, can the contractor add or subtract machinery at any given time, or do they have to wait until the end of that period of time?
There's a position that they, under our policy, that allows them to do it at the halfway mark. Every 12 months. Every 12 months you can add. So you can replace like for like, but if you want to add additional, it's got to be done at the halfway mark.
I know
And that's just straight from our procurement policy. or is it somewhere else? It might be by resolution, I think, actually, that one. Anyway, I know it's black and white, some I just can't recall, but it was firmly resolved, because we used to do this every 12 months. It's very onerous task for contractors to do. I mean, years ago we did that, and then we said we'll go to 2 years, but then it was a long time to wait to change gear if you upgrade in that time. So we said, well, it's a 2-year pre-qualified list, and you can update your list every 12 months. But without going through the full pre-approval process.
I think that was my main.
Clarify, councillors, as to what the issue.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Still need that legal room, Mr. Mayor.
You do. Correct. Well, yes, you do. Either voluntarily or involuntarily. Officers, who's going to lead us here? Brett, what's happened to you? Gary.
When we called tenders for the wet dry clean fire in August last year, the GMD Ballard put in a tender that they uploaded into Blackwell 10 Regional Council Centre. On vendor panel. And they had been previously on the list with us. We didn't. We knew they had put in, so we just assumed that they were no longer interested with us until we received a letter from them in January saying that they uploaded to the wrong tender, to the wrong vendor panel side. We have checked with Blackwell Tambo Regional Council, and they did. So Blackwell Tambo sent all the documents to us that they uploaded. They made an error. So they accept that and allow them to go back on from this.
Councillor Pond,
I don't have a problem with it.
Councillor Roberts.
Could I ask, they've been previously on the list for
Forever.
years, yeah.
I
think it's an honest mistake, so.
Yeah. I'd be very confident about the honesty of the mistake. Gary Ballard's been a contractor forever in Western Queensland. He wouldn't want to fall off the list unless he was completely retiring, I would imagine. So, yeah, Councillor Beavers.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Plum. Those in favour? 4-0. Right, all bar Tom can come. Councillor Gleeson can return. That's correct.
I haven't got
No, sorry. Sorry, no, my mistake. Sorry. It's the wrong order. I was thinking of the debt recovery one, isn't it? Debt water?
There it is.
The Cape Dark one.
Yeah.
You're the chairman.
I was thinking of it. Councillors, you've received the material. Any questions about this? Yes.
Yeah, just got a question. We have asked the acting CEO to check on the allocations for all our towns. So this extra allocation of 80 megalitres here, is this just for Park Horn or is this for the Park Horn and Council?
No, it's separate to the others. This is not the follow-up to that. This is the follow-up from when we received permission for the seasonal allocation of the water from Ergon Energy for the rec park.
Right.
It was made on the condition that when this release was made, we applied for that 80 meg. So we were told we could have that water, but when this came out, we had to apply.
Right. Thank you.
And that's the maximum that Barcaldine would be allowed to apply. There's an unlimited amount of water being released. It's not unlimited, but a large amount, but because of the drawdown effect on the springs, the science is saying that the maximum Barcaldine could have without causing detrimental impact on the springs is 80 meg. Aramac, Muttaburra, Jericho, alpha are not affected by that. So different issues, different, and that process to apply for that water for the other communities, Alpha and Jericho are excluded from it because they're not part of the GAB. That's open, this tender process is open for 12 months. So we're doing this because we've been told that was the only reason we could get the water. This is the quid pro quo for the Ergon water, effectively. And the other work about town allocations can feed into this at a later date.
I'll move.
Seconder, Councillor Henson, any other questions about
Mr Mayor, if throughout the document it says water is being made available for purposes related to agriculture, industry and renewable energy, how does what you've just described work into those three categories?
I don't begin to understand the inner workings of how some of these agencies fathom with their political operatives. There is obviously the understanding as well that they are aware of that we are reusing our sewage water, which demand side savings is actually found the water that's required anyway. But because we are putting some water directly from the GAB directly into the lake, that's coming from our town cap, the understanding was we would apply for extra. They're also aware of that. The two of those three things are occurring or about potentially about to occur here. So that could lead to, we actually technically would be able to operate on current usage underneath the existing town cap without that. We'd be close to or on it like we are now. So therefore, any growth in it caused by any of those areas that you'd outlined would put us over.
Yeah.
And the department, when they initially had conversations with us, were aware of the potential for economic growth and saying you're going to use your free water, like the water free in the cap, for your recreational activity. You're not putting water aside or not preserving water for expansion in one of those three areas. And I think that's the purpose. They're not going to put in a document. You know, and somewhere will pick up on this audio too. We're being very candid about this conversation, but they're not going to put in a document all water for a recreational lake because they've expressly gone the reverse about that. There's two plans that I know of that specifically exclude the use like we've done out here. You can't do it, which was a decision that was made after we had applied for the grant, which was a contentious point all the way through about why they wouldn't grant us permission to use the water because it was legal to do it at the time that we applied to construct it there. And they changed the rules after that time, but we'd already been through the process.
But is there then the potential that if we are successful, that 80 meg is warehoused for those particular uses?
I'll ask Brett to answer that. My understanding, though, before I do, is that no, our current cap is 1,300 and what? This will go to 1,440 and we decide where it goes.
Because then 1.4 it says purpose of water. Applications will not be acceptable for other activities or purposes such as those, and B is related to drinking water by a drinking water service provider registered under the Water Supply Act. And from what I can see, a local government is
An urban utility for that.
Yes.
Yes. Brett, you want to answer that? I'll come to you, Councillor.
Oh, it's probably all very complicated, and
It's not meant to be easy intentionally, yeah. They don't want people applying for it.
So it's not, as they said, I'm not sure how they're thinking, but they specifically written to us. Oh, it's 80 meg allocated to Barcol, maximum 80. So if someone else Barcol could apply as well, not discuss.
Yeah.
And they could apply for those other purposes. They'd have to then fit those criteria.
yeah. And then, because I think it does say minimum and maximum, so in our application, are we setting a minimum and maximum? Or are we just saying we want 80 or nothing?
I think we're asking for the maximum, yeah. That would be my approach. Anything less than that's not worth asking for.
Until it opens, I need to see what the application is.
The reason we're putting the resolution to you today, if you note paragraph 2, it says they open from, will be accepted from 31 March, closing, I said 1 year, 2 years, till 1 April 24. Sorry, Councillor Peoples.
Allocation is exhausted.
But that's my fear.
Yeah.
That someone smart will jump in the minute this opens, and if we dither around and don't get our application in, we want to be 31 March, open the business, we want our application, in my opinion, if it is to guarantee success, to be the first one they receive. So therefore, the first one they assess, and it's approved. That's my on the time frame. Councillor Rivers, are you looking for something in the report?
No, I can't believe my account if this will be wrong.
Councillor Gleeson, your question.
My question is the $1,420 per megalitre. First question, that is $114,000 a year. Is that every year?
No, that's you own it. You buy it.
Just one, just one off.
Because I think it says it runs to 2111, so that's 9 years, close to.
Your second question.
It made it, yeah, that makes it slightly different. I thought it makes it slightly different than what I was comparing. I was comparing megalitres out of the Great Artesian Basin against megalitres out of a man-made dam. But the man-made dam is per year, is only a smidgen per year compared with this. But the way I understand it, what you just said is that $1,420 that's it.
But that's the same. That 1,420. That's about the same. If you go and buy a permanent allocation out of Fairburn Dam, I think at the moment retail, like it's public option, I think it sold the last one for about $1,500 a megalitre.
But for how long?
For life, that's permanent allocation. If you buy the permanent allocation, you can buy the short-term stuff like you're talking about, the trading water. You can buy it for a couple of bucks. At the moment, I think it's about $350 the spot price for water. But if you buy this is a permanent allocation. So those that have permanent allocations out of surface water holdings, water's water, like where it comes from, doesn't. The price is very stagnant across the state for that. The seasonal stuff is cheaper because it's bought from people with permanent allocations usually, or unused water that's been returned back into the Sunwater cap.
Mr. Mayor, there's no negotiation on that price.
No, that's their price. That's the set market price. Yeah.
So, Mr. Mayor, if we're successful, we've got enough money in the budget.
It could be taken from elements of this budget, but it more than likely probably won't be required to be paid for. Probably won't even finish its assessment period until into the next budget. 31 March, I can't see them turning that around and requesting it within 3 months myself. Might be wrong, but that would be lightning speed if it was.
It's all right, Mr. Mayor, you answered my question. I really wanted to question the 1,420 per unit and per time, and you've answered both of them. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, it's. I did some homework on that, on what they were charging, but it fits with the Callide, fits with Fitzroy, the permanent allocations out of those surface water. As I say, because they're market driven, this is an initial release, and they do the same thing. When they do the initial release, they go and take market value for water and balance it out. Remember, a lot of this is in the south, and it will have a irrigation market value down there. I know, yeah. Anyway. So, Councillor Hanson, sorry, you seconded it, so you're right. Thanks, Councillor Rogers. You're ready to go. You don't want to do the rest of the agenda. Councillor Bluff. Councillor Arthur.
Does that mean we can on-sell that allocation? Is that allowable as a local government authority under the? Because like if we get 11 months through our year and only use 75% of it, that may not be any good to anyone either. But
I don't know the answer to your question in terms of this. I know some surface water schemes very well, and that's exactly how it works. They work out, they have usually parks for more than they need, and then they get to a point where they realise whether they're not planting another crop, and then they go, well, there's high priority water here, $500 a megalitre, she's all yours.
and it is considerably different in it comes through our bores into a reservoir as opposed to Fairburn Dam or that's got canal systems and
The difference is, and else is licensed to the bulls extract from certain aquifers and so forth, but it could be selling. It's a question of that.
It's, so you get a purpose. So we have ours for town purposes, but 150 megalitres of that is for any purpose. So potentially about 150 go into the red park. Could be used for any, it's just over.
Yeah.
But the rest is for town purposes, so you have, I don't know whether you can sell it or not, but could it have to be something?
oh, it may not even be something. It may be something that we can do something else with.
Well, effectively, we're selling it to the rate.
Thank you.
We're on selling it to the rate pattern. We pay more the rates, we get more. We just increase the. If there's an industrial development.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Someone could start up a seasonal bottling plant, bottle water as we get to May each year and we've got X amount of water left under it. All right. A good question we can take on that to follow up on. What's the tradability of our water?
Oh, it may be to no benefit until either town is bigger or there's some industrial sort of or intensive agriculture close to town that would make it viable.
They have to actually tap into our bore network. That you're right.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to go to the vote?
Yep.
Those in favour? Yes. 7-0. No, we're all clear on this one. Three, 3, 1, 3. Officers have put the recommendation to be at your discretion, councillors, so discretion away. I note the letter from Buckle Rugby League is not dated, but I assume this was received following our community consultation. Thank you. What are you to do with council?
So we've only received that letter. So it's a grant request. It's not following policy. As in using the approved form. Is that correct?
Sorry, the form is, I did receive the form.
Okay.
I was on the same page as you. I wanted you to pick up on a councillor after. I wasn't going to leave you there, but thought I'd done a fairly good job.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask? Brent, is it right on 1,000 or 3,500? Those forms are 500. I don't know they've been changed.
In kind assistance. Cash.
So would you call this cash?
I'd treat it as in kind. That is. It is, well,
Cash from the football club?
yeah. So, either way, it's still up.
Yeah.
Councillor Gleeson?
Mr. Mayor, am I right in saying that the football club has contributed $40,000 towards this project? That's the way that it reads in their letter.
Yes.
So they've written, they put $40,000 up and got a grant on top of their 40. So it must be a fairly substantial amount of money that they're putting, that the awning is costing must be a substantial amount of money.
Do we know? I do know. So I saw it in a DA report many months ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. The value of work on, was it 100,000?
So it's saying in excess of 100,000. It's,
The whole value is 100, they put up 40 and got 60.
yes. I think
Just, so yes, Councillor Hanson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think personally, it's upgrading council asset. So I think it's probably within my opinion, it's within our interest to waiver those costs. I'll start that ball rolling.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm completely open to hearing discussion on this. There's probably three options, really. That's put there as two, but think of it in three ways. You can agree to waive none of it, all of it, or part of it, if you're worried about cost recovery, but you also want to be generous. You can have it put on both sides of the fence. That's probably the decision that's here to be made today, is you're giving it fully to them, partially to them, or none of it to them. Councillor Hanson suggesting waiving or Councillor Gleeson.
I'm suggesting waiver it because if there's a $100,000 improvement to a council facility on council grounds.
Can I understand that question about it being a council facility? I mean, it legally is a council facility, but what's the nature of our arrangement with the footy club regarding the use of that facility by anybody other than the footy club? So can anyone help me there?
Mr Mayor, at that community forum, it is they have to negotiate with the club, so the decision is the club's.
And are they able to, this is probably not answer my question here, but they could hire that to, let's just say I want to have my engagement party there. Never make that mistake twice, but should I, then they have the right to, she doesn't watch the video, so I'm safe. They could hire that facility quite independently of council.
Mr Mayor, potentially.
Yeah. So yes, it's council owned, but we can't hire it to somebody, they do. And there is a slight difference between that. And you may not be worried about that, and I'm not raising it in the light of trying to make you be worried about that. But there is a nuance between that and, say, the showgrounds, the dining bar area.
Mr. Mayor, when we waive the fee like this, we still pay GBA for, yeah, so.
And it's cost recovery. We don't make anything out of that $16.76.50. That's their fee. Is that correct? Or have we got a percentage on top?
that should cover the fee.
So when we waive something, we're paying for it.
I tell you the other point, because I have sounded like a negative individual with what I just said then. What I am very impressed with is somebody who's not only chased the grant and got it, because there's some groups around that could do some assistance in that respect, both motivation and physical assistance, but they're also putting $40,000. Like that to me is what I want to see groups that have the capacity to do that. If you've got money and you've run various events over a long period of time, that to me is rewardable. Yes, I agree, Councillor Peoples, it does cost councils the $1,676, but in a way we're helping facilitate co-investment in whether it's our facility or a murky arrangement around whose facility it is. I get that, but it presents our community well, and even if it is for the exclusive use of rugby league, there's 4 to 5 home games a year here every year, plus juniors. When we present one of our community groups presents one of our facilities to the outside world, it's presenting it in a positive light. And if I probably need no better example than to look at Ilfracombe, the smallest town to host rugby league in Western Queensland, it's probably got the best facilities. Oh, well, it's, what would you say, Councillor Arthur? Pretty good. What they've got there.
The whole setup.
Yeah.
The rec club. And,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty good setup there. It's significantly better than what we have in either of our footy towns. So anyway, I'm on the fence, I don't care, I just want to hear the resolution.
Mr Mayor, I'll move that we,
Well, hang on, I'll go to each councillor first before we move. What's your option though?
I'm agreeing to wait.
So that's the same as councillor Hanson. Councillor Plum?
Mr Mayor, you must realise that, I'm pretty sure you'll find that Senior League would allow any of the multi-users at the fairgrounds to go in and utilise this facility. It's going to be there for everybody.
They just got to ask.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be expensive. And they did get $23,000 out of RSQ to go with this, which is the money that was spent on fence. So they're putting that up there, and they've spoken to RSQ. So they shifted up there.
So that's an additional grant.
Where from? Councillor?
RACQ.
They were here just before Christmas, weren't they?
Through you, Mr Mayor, they've received funding from RSQ to do some fence replacement, and it's not enough to do the whole oval. And then, yeah, after some discussions with RSQ, they've allowed them to use it for the deck and the cover, or for this extension.
And I might add that the golf club have been successful in getting $25,000 grant from them as well to refurbish the golf club. So RSQ is top at the moment with grants and they're running to our
So I've got, what are you in terms of this?
some in favour
Of waiving it entirely? So I've got 3 in favour of doing that. Councillor Rogers?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm in favour of waiving. The thing about the building, we mightn't have the use of it as our own infrastructure, but it'll be on our asset register, it'll be our asset. Like,
We'll be paying for the depreciation,
Yeah.
right? Yes.
so, then,
That's a lot.
but yeah,
I have two arguments, Mr Mayor. One's quite strongly for waiving it, and one's quite strongly for not.
If I was in a high school debating, I wouldn't care whether I was the affirmative or the negative on this.
Yeah.
Like I can, from a financial justification point of view, this is a direct cost to council. We're not making, it's not like we're profiteering in any way, shape or form out of this fee. It would be very easy for me to not lose 1 week of sleep out of saying, no, that's got to be paid. But then conversely, I'm over the moon about a group who can raise in excess of $100,000 in grant money and put $40,000 of their own cake stalls into. So therefore I'm thinking it's the $1,600 that we're putting in chicken feed, really.
And you're going to have to rip these people at some stage this year, no doubt.
Referee's cop, it doesn't matter whether I waive the 1676 or not, council. I won't be a hero for more than...
Mr Mayor, yeah, the
Sorry.
community groups' substantial contribution. The thing that I have against is it's not necessarily something that council came up with. Like if it was our idea and the footy club got the grant and they were building something that we really wanted, I'd be even stronger for it. It's something that the club wants. It is an improvement to users of the showgrounds. Like we have cricket. It's probably not a bad place to watch a bit of cricket from. We have rugby union or other school sports. It's maybe a little bit messy with the lease over because I think access is only through the clubhouse. So that will be the clarifying bit about other clubs using it. And knowing that it's been on the horizon for quite a while, a little bit earlier interaction might have been appreciated. But on balance, for waiving.
Right. So Councillor Peoples, I believe you indicated a willingness to move. Is there somebody who's willing to second? Councillor Gleeson.
Oh, and just to clarify for everyone watching at home that I am an ex-player but hold no executive or any connection other than a volunteer. I probably should have stated that.
For those watching at home, in the spirit of your declaration, referees cop lots from that deck. We won't get too much given to us at all in terms of positive reinforcement. So, right, I have that. I think we've kicked this around the room enough, and in the absence of any negative comment here, go to the vote. Those in favour, 7-0. So Ahmed, you have sat here quite patiently for nearly 4 hours, and I'm now asking you to present your financial report, and in doing so, note our very best since we've been measuring sustainability by the simplified matrix, the best financial sustainability that you've been able to present today.
Been good so far. We've come up really good with all the money that was going through DMR contracts, contract claims and RMPC. Yeah,
Do you have anything that you'd like to note before I ask councillors for their questions?
from the capital, from the graphs of, we've changed the inventory.
Yes.
We've
Oh, right.
So we've taken out, like the swimming pool, the budget for swimming pool, which is different now next year, which brings the building and others down to the one budget was taken out, being there. And then the flood damage amounts for year 19, 20 have been adjusted after the present year, just mentioned that we will be getting whatever we've spent. So it's not that complicated.
Flood damage, sorry, just going to put the flood damage by event graph. Did you remove it? Sorry? You know, you had the flood damage is broken up by the 2 or the 3 now events.
They are between on page.
You got that? Which page, sorry?
Yeah,
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I just like looking at that expenditure too, because it shows us when we start getting front. I like when we get rid of the cash that they pay us up front, because then we know even though we're in negative territory, there's money flowing in as the money flows out. We're not burning up this fake money. And you've already got that figure is listed when you say flood damage and loans. So you're down to only about 2.6 million. Is that right? If I take the 2 million for the loan out, it's only about 2.6 in prepaid flood damage work now.
2.9.
2.9. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll probably be going by next month. Really, whatever we spend, is what we get.
So what it means, it does, because our cash position monthly is pretty well what it is. There's less exclusions or deductions for works paid in.
Yeah, and the sustainability does cover anyway, keeping it perspective. We're paying for damage to
2 to 6 months has been our target for sustainability, but to be halfway through that instead of right on the bottom of it's better, edging the right way. And obviously we completed a hour of TMR works in the lead up to Christmas, but that's all still cash. It's not allocated against anything, and there's still a hour more to happen between now and June. So hopefully our cash position can only keep inching in the right direction. Questions, councillors? The rates.
yeah, that was on that page. So,
Sorry,
yes, we missed one page on that then.
and that's the rates too, is it? Could I just see that page, Summit, please? That's fine, thank you. So that outstanding rates figure is just colossal, like really commendable to our ratepayers and staff and everybody. We've got $136,000 outstanding from our new rates out of a total rates arrears of 200, if anyone wants to write it down, 284,894. So our gross outstanding rates is under 300,000 and of new rates it's under 150,000. That's, but as a percentage of gross rate take, that's really, really good. Really.
What's that, 0.5%?
I'll
Was
defer to
it
you.
500,000 out of say 300?
Well, the rates are about 7.
For the half year. You're
But for the
talking.
half, yeah, for the, yeah, so, yeah, roughly.
Mm.
Very, very.
I'll defer to your superior mathematical ability. And those 5-year plus things, well, they're just a write-off anyway, but they're non-recoverable fictitious rate owners that we're looking to get rid of at Sardine Creek, aren't they? A lot of them. Not Sardine Creek, Sardine. Yeah. Yeah, so that balance in the bank is 2.95 councillors, 2,955,000. Not much change out of 3 million left that we've received in advance.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Gleeson, yes.
So, Matt, on page 172, with the actual versus the budget, is the actual update in the budget for a year, or is the budget only for that period, the exact same period?
Year-to-date budget, so it's just budget to that month, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So it's just budget till January, which is 58% of the total.
Was there something you wanted to highlight there, Councillor Gleeson?
No, just that the actuals are way over the budgets, but they will, I'd imagine,
Yes.
that the ingoings and outgoings that are not exactly there with that much.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, like, as we've mentioned, the sales revenue over there is over the budget because of the amount of jobs and all that. And it's similar in the expenditure as well for goods and services.
Mm. So you see that, Councillor Gleeson? So if you look in the second column down, sorry, the second graph, materials and services are about $2 million over budget in expenses, and we're about $2.4 million over budget in revenue. So we've done more than we expected, and we've spent more than we expected to. Because that revenue is gross revenue, not net. It's just physically receipts.
Thank you.
My last point would be around rural road maintenance, where only 58% of the year expended, but we are more than 58% of the budget. The senior work supervisor is going to need more money. They look like they're running out. There's only 300,000 left. And their busiest 4 months of maintenance is in front of them, I would have thought. No history. Page 173. I hate to see the graders parked up because they don't have money. If they need more, well, let us know. Maybe the flood damage works is still to account for a significant portion of that. But
That's pretty quick.
sorry.
We reduced the budget too for this year, didn't we?
Oh yeah, substantially, massively so. And it was a guess at that. That's what I'm saying. It could quite well be that we were a little bit too harsh. But if there's still scheduled flood damage to take the place of it, I'm sure that there will be graders on rural roads, so before too long, it may not be. So we need to up that, let us know.
And that's something we've taken into account for this budget at 1.2 of the month.
Well, we also won't have
Because,
$30 million worth of flood damage in this budget either.
because we had a lot of those machines working on this Narrowman Park, that would normally be doing all that too. So the three years to maybe we have it in the third year budget, and it for the third year budget to go back. Spending all the roads and keep it low for 2 years so that we can do all this. Flood damage roads.
So the third year budget is about to become the second year budget. Is there
We
any-
still have to see how much we can do for the
No, what I mean, sorry, is,
22 flood damage.
oh yeah, I see. Yeah. Right. Questions? That's rather. Andrew? Plum? Rogers? Gleeson? Councillor People? Councillor Sarmat? Councillor Plum moves. Councillor Gleeson seconds. Those in favour? 7-0. Well done. Sarmat, but you're not finished yet. 342, project progress report. We're not discussing Porter Street footpath until you leave, so you can wait. Questions for Sarmad on these? So they're broken up by goals, which has increased the size of the font for those who appreciate that.
Change the format to break it into the goals. Hopefully to make it easier.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I take the right to comment later on the changes. Might take me a month or so to get used to it.
Right, because they're not all in one big table anymore. Sorry, Councillor Plum. I reckon he spoke quiet at that time rather than he did the first time. What was that, sorry?
I was asking councillor after, does not want to come up.
No, just before.
I did appreciate all the questions coming through the chair, Councillor Plum, instead of these sideline conversations. I feel left out. All right, any questions? Sarmad, anything to worry here?
As I mentioned, I've taken up, I've adjusted the road for damage amounts of the projects and as well as the swimming pool as well. And there's a more clear picture of where we are on all the projects and variances. And it's clear picture.
Just a couple of questions within here. The TIDS funding for Currajump Drive, given that project was completed within budget, we've been able to reallocate that TIDS somewhere, or is there a second seal that's due to cost exactly 12,851? Where are we at with that?
Follow that through.
Because TIDS, you don't get, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I note that Barcaldine Airport's marked as completed within budget. That's actually not slated for reseal until the 7th of March. So we're not well within budget there, are we? No,
Yeah, we're on 7th of March, 3 you mean?
that's right. But so it's not actually completed yet, so I think
No.
we won't realise an $86,000 saving there. I saw that last night. I thought, if you sealed that prospect for 13,000, holy moly. And Pine Hill floodway upgrades is marked as green, but probably should be yellow if it's complete, because it's a overspend of 3,200. Solar installations are complete for Acacia Street. Are they operational? Does anyone know? Are we actually off grid there? Are we on solar? Lad or Jenny?
Few, Mr Mayor, for the first ones I haven't released, but I'll follow up on.
Thank you. Happy for you just to advise us out of session on that, Jenny. No need to put that in a report. And just out of a evaluation point of view, could we identify the point that that board did go, the solar did go live, and track over the next 12 months what the ergon, I assume that board is on an individual meter, but is that a broad assumption? Can we just track perhaps monthly or quarterly or however the bill comes in, what the actual real reduction in expenditure has been, so that we can begin to quantify what our solar return has been? Because we were told that the return on investment there was going to be 2.3 years on that bore alone. Am I right? My memory's not failing me, because it's about 4 years ago we were briefed on that. 2.3, or it was less than 2.5 years, I reckon. So it'd be good to just, I mean, I don't care if it's 5 years, but I really would like to just monitor that is the reality. And the other thing that will be interesting but also confusing, is if the new bore goes on the same meter, which I'll be once again broadly assuming it will, say that we wait 12 months for ergon to connect power for us, he won't be comparing true apples with apples, but because we'll be probably pumping a bigger pump, possibly not for as long. But if we can still measure what ergon's reduction is, it still gives us something to be able to say, well, solar's. And I'm not sure, officers, if you can also have a look at your own buildings that we've already done this with. If there'd be some way we could do a bit of an historical analysis, say, for example, the Alpha Administration Office, Damien, if we can look at what the power bill was in the period preceding to what it is now. It goes a little bit of a way towards any future investment decisions we may make around solar, because we have heard chatter around some of our budget meetings about solar.
So we can get that information, because LGAQ through LG Sherlock is measuring our power. We do get bonuses. What do we pay then? We pay them for any
That's,
percentage, so
that's big.
yeah.
Right, it's not, I've stressed officers, it's not necessarily the highest priority, but just a little bit of that would be some useful information.
It would be fairly simple to get out of Sherlock.
Yeah.
What I use experience.
Right.
And I believe more is connected. Oh, when I was down there, I told me it's connected to the solar board with the lights were on.
Yeah. There is an phase ergon, phase emails coming through to me. I haven't logged on, so you can actually monitor. And I think it definitely gets that one. The board's still finished.
So, Jenny, is there any consideration, and I'm not sure who to aim this at, but perhaps it's Vlad, has there been any consideration given to optimising our pump times with respect to the fact that we're now solar? I mean, previously, I believe we probably would have pumped at night because that's the low demand usage time. But because we're going solar, the best dollar time for us, obviously we're still going to have to pump at night to catch up whilst we're in the current arrangement, but are we configuring our pumping to try and maximise daylight hours?
For you, Mayor, we haven't considered it, but that can be considered through the new SCADA system, where it can be turned off and on whenever we want to. Yeah,
Theoretically.
theoretically we can do that. And right now, once it's finished, yes, and then the SCADA's up and running and the systems are in place, we should be able to do that. And it'll depend how much money we're getting in return.
Really, we need to increase demand during daylight hours. and reduce demand. Oh, so about pumping costs, which is now the fact that it's a watering during the end of the day. Save power during the day. Waste water during the day. Really, it should be. You want to save power, you need to allow water use during the day.
Can we ask for the budget meeting where we discuss water allocations, finalise that for a bit of consideration around those regulated hours there, so we can see whether that's efficient and effective from both a water efficiency point of view, but also from a effectiveness for power utilisation. Because I'd like to think that the consultant who developed the report for us around the return on investment should just simply look at the power usage at the bore holistically and the power that the array will be able to produce holistically, and say, well, I can pump that, I can provide that in 2.5 years when our pumping times probably currently outside peak solar productivity. Like, I hope that they were a little bit more in depth.
They did well.
Anyway, we'll log it too. But it would be good to save, to operate that when. Councillor Gleeson, I suppose it's almost the reverse of the way you and I would set up a cattle station watering point. We try to pump while no one's drinking so that everything's full and the cattle get the water. But in this case, that's before we use solar. There's when everyone goes to these solar setups. Well, they want to be pumping when the sun's up, which means you're trying to keep pace with demand. It's going to be catch-22, and it's why on a cloudy day, someone's got to go and start a generator at a solar pump.
That's why you've got more reservoirs.
Or you have a bigger storage capacity, that's right.
You get more reservoirs. And it's very, very simple education at home. On our private place there is we use as much power as we can from 7 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. Do all the washing and the ironing and the cleaning and whatever, pump as much water, do everything that we possibly can during the day. Whereas a few years ago, you do it all the night time when everything was cool. Totally reverse. Mr. Mayor, I want to ask you a question, please. The Good Neighbour program, pest and weeds management, the Good Neighbour program. I thought the Good Neighbour program was is it still active, or there's money there, and can you explain a little bit more of that, please?
I can't, but I'll ask Brett too, or Damien.
Which, sorry, where we're at.
The very last article, there's $180,000 in the budget, there's been $48,000 spent.
Oh,
178 on the
there you go.
Good one. Progress reports next page.
It is, so you can see we're still waiting on that final payment for that. So we put a final claim into the government. We haven't received any response. So once we receive that final payment, well, we're not spending it all.
Yeah, so that, the Good Neighbour program is definitely, it won't be on that list much longer.
Well, it'll stay on until the 30th of June.
Yeah.
Drop off, yeah.
So is that $180,000? No, the actual cost. Are we billing for the 48 or the 180? Are we asking?
It's about 40,000. So 180 was the budget a bit later. We only spent 131, so we actually say 48,000. We didn't spend all that money, so we're not going to get all that money either. Yep. Spend.
Yeah, to be honest, we've launched the equipment for that. Total funding was 3. Now, we might not get
Okay, any other questions?
Oh, sorry, Mr Mayor, the plant.
Yep.
It was the September meeting where we decided on graders rollers and the four-wheel drive. Do we have delivery dates or?
Yes. So plan
It's always good to ask a question, then it's
March.
28th of February, they're in,
Singapore, Mr Mayor?
they're in stock or in the warehouse. They'll be dispatched on the 28th of February.
And so, through you, Mr Mayor, we only pay on delivery, do we, or?
So we'll get 2 graders for roller. Early March.
Yeah, sorry, we've got.
Toyota's coming?
It would be best advice on selling them if we could, because we could add 10% on top of them and get our money back.
Yes.
Oh,
Did you two just set that up?
Gee, there's a light on that. It's ordered.
So Jenny's just forwarded me some information that's on deciphering on the run here, but it's the production of solar from the Acacia Street Board, the monthly energy report. We have, for each week in January, produced I'll just forward it to you all so you can read it for yourself. But so, for example, in the first week of January, we produced roughly a third of what we consumed. The same the next week. Then the following week, the third week in January, we still produced roughly 3,000 megawatts, but we used 15,000 instead of 10,000. So we slipped back to a fifth. And then as January wore on, we were producing less and using less, almost matched. So obviously that was as the wet weather hit. It was lower. So there is a measurable, quite measurable there. I'd say look at that. Look at the
38%.
Yeah.
Self-reliance.
that we've reduced our bill by 28% effectively. In a week, months that had, 6 or 7 days of pretty cloudy weather. Which of course here, if it rains, also reduces the amount that needs to pump anyway. The interesting note for those of you that are somewhat green in nature is that we offset 10 tonnes of carbon, which is equivalent to 257 trees. So that just saved a lot of planting. That's a very useful report. I just took a bit of time to decipher it, but yeah.
Save the trees or.
We've looked at planting. Yeah. If you wanted to offset that carbon in some other way, other than solar, you'd have to buy 257 trees worth of offsets. Councillor Peoples is a resident expert in that now.
Down 2 metres of gravel. Big trees don't count.
Right. Any more? 343, can someone move and receive that report? Oh, sorry, yeah. That's right, Porter Street. Do we have any questions for Porter Street footpath? Can someone move the report? Councillor Arthur, seconded Councillor Plum. Those in favour? 0. He can come back here.
Mr Mayor, might be something to put in the Gazette, just a little, a short version, like of trees, just what people prefer.
What? I was actually thinking you were serious.
I mean, I am.
We should put a holistic summary. Councillor Rogers is whispering to me on the side here that we should summarise some of that information around our solar offsets in a future edition of the Gazette. I think it's a very good idea once we have, I'd imagine, something similar to that for a lot of our different facilities, so we can target that and refine it in a simplistic way.
Ms. Mayor, I can share that with the board my plans. I have got the other thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can share them back forward.
Someone can collate that collectively, that'd be great. All right. Can I have somebody move we receive the Community Care Services Report 343? Councillor Plum, second Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? 7-0. Simon?
Gone back and worked on those more rehabilitation, very listed. Still, we have to sort depreciation there because most of the depreciation is related to housing. And going forward, we might move housing existing out of this case also, and then some so the law rehabilitation will probably on to that.
Yeah, you're right. It kind of doesn't make sense that we've got housing appreciation in a community care services program when we're not offering that housing as a part of it. It's not like we are renting housing to NDIS customers as a specific component of the program eligibility. So it is an anomaly, isn't it? I hadn't considered that.
It should be around 80% of that's
That would reduce that down to well under 100,000 indirect loss. You're aware of what I'm saying there, councillors? That some of our housing depreciation is having a negative impact, or is having a negative impact on our overall indirect net profit, whereas it really should be attributed to other business areas of council because it's not specifically related to offering these care packages. Would any council have a disagreement with that if we looked at weeding that out? Effectively, depreciation would then be on our motor vehicles and any internal office space that's used. So, Alpha office, the Anamac office, and wherever.
it'll be minimum, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
What it is now.
Council is in agreement if we look to amend future reporting in that respect. Good pick up, so mate. Well done. Questions?
No, Mr. Mayor.
You think you do have one, but you can't remember it?
No, well, I don't know whether I'm looking at the wrong, like, our year-to-date actual and projected annual seem to have swapped around from last month. Because I'm looking at last month's report, it was up to the 31st of December, and we were 150,000 net profit loss on our year-to-date, and minus 236 on our projected annual. But now we're year-to-date actual is 231, and our projected annual is minus 120.
Is that as a result of those changes, though, Samet, that you've made in what you've included?
It's only just jumped out at me and I can't see quickly enough jumping between two screens to see why.
Did we receive a half yearly funding from CHS for January? Does that still come in 6 months?
Yes.
So we'll receive the lump sum in January.
Still last month, what I'm looking at here, with last month's reporting in May, it suggests that our year-to-date actual was, without overhead was 302,000. Projected annual was 68,000.
So now we're going 361 and 102.
Are you, Mr. Mayor? So you, Mr. Mayor, are you referring to the net profit of 1
The very bottom line. Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah.
Yeah, so it was 153.39 last month and it's 231 this month.
That's what, Mr. Mayor, we've adjusted the overhead allocation and restructured the overhead allocation, how they've been calculated. We're readjusting as a result of it's all. It's making a difference, but as I mentioned, we also have to graph.
So those assumptions that are used, because that's all they are in that bottom box, is the top one's are real, the
Yeah.
bottom is assumption.
Yeah.
The finance team have changed the assumptions around the cost overhead allocations,
Yeah.
revised them substantially down because administrative overheads had sat last month at 120,000, whereas this month they've been wound back for the year to date to only 91. Whereas they should have, if we had used the same methodology, they would have increased from 119 to approximately 135. So there's been a $70,000 turnaround there in the assumption calculation alone, which has just meant that you've lowered the amount of, lowered the percentage of other elements of council's cost allocation to this project.
They're different way, we haven't just lowered them, but we've looked at it in greater perspective and just brought it down.
Worked out what it actually is instead of assuming.
What it actually would be estimated in the
I'm not sure if you.
If that's more accurate and realistic, then that's a lot better position, yeah.
There was a lot of, I remember in the briefing that Tony and yourself gave us, I'm going to say it's nearly 12 months ago now, or more, there was some broad guesstimates in that, whereas you're saying as you've gone through this, every time we keep interrogating you about it, you've spent more time pinning down how much of each resource area of council's applied to it.
Yes, and we can still go, if you want to go through the lower education, we can go through.
Trimmed substantially to what it was. And I'm fine with it being trimmed, as Councillor Arthur said, if that is a reflection of reality, not just trimming it to make the figure look better. So you're happy with that answer, Councillor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor, I've one more important question for Sunday. There's been a very planning paper.
On that note, we'll move on to the work report. I'm not going to start World War III with one of Buckhorn residents' newest Australians. Close enough. 351. Can I have somebody move the Director of Works report? Councillor Pickles, second Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Black.
Probably the most important one would be the waste collection. That will close 9th of March and that will give us a good indication of cost per bin. There was quite a lot of work put into that to work out our current costs, but because we couldn't really get accurate numbers for Muttaburra, Jericho and Buckhorn, they were a little bit confusing, but we managed to get some numbers. So that closes 9th of March. Hopefully we'll be able to work it out from there to which way we're going to head.
Okay, questions? None?
It's more so a questions on this.
No questions for that? I've never been to a meeting of Buckhorn Regional Council where neither the Director of Works or the CEO was asked a single question about their reports. Today is the first time.
Get the gavel.
Vlad, thank you. Vlad, I'm aware, as councillors would be, that today is not your last day, but your last general meeting, last formal meeting with councillors. on behalf of those councillors and members, people of the Buckhorn Regional Council, thank you very much for your service and for the time that you've spent with us. You've had a very big undertaking to do, and we admire your effort, diligence and execution in that role, and wish you all the very best, and your wife Glenna and all your family with whatever the next stage of your working life brings. I hope that you can remember just a little small part of the Barcaldine summers.
I will. Through you, Mayor, I will.
Very good. No, thank you. And I'm, you're one of the CEO staff, but yeah, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the effort you've gone to and on our behalf and following up on our requests and executing the role as you have in the time that you've been with us. So thank you very much.
Here.
352. Okay. Is there anything that you need to point out here, lad? Is it as straightforward as it appears?
Through you, Mayor, not really. It's a straightforward cap highway. Recoverable, and so just preparing, ready to go when the time comes.
Councillor Peebles? Moves. Second. Hanson. Councillor Hanson. Any debate? Councillor Gleeson? Councillor Roberts? Plum? Those in favour? 6-0. Carried. Yes, please. Can I somebody move Damien's report, please? Councillor Peebles, seconded. Councillor Rogers, those in favour? Carried. Damien?
Mr. Mayor, just the library transition's been going through a process, completed the works at the BAQ, and we've also started this training for computers in there.
I mean, the Mecca Jericho Cafe business. What's that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just heard an inquiry of the cafe business city, so I went to Leighton just in relation to an inquiry with contact with the LEHO.
Is it opening up again?
It is open, yes, it has been open.
Been up for several months.
Yeah, just before Christmas.
Very good.
Been open, I believe, 8 to 5 weekdays, and then also open on Saturday as well.
Very good.
Had a period there due to a power problem. Since they've been open, they'd be shut for a few days, but yeah, no, they've been open. Any more questions? Three, 7-1. Could I have somebody move Paul's report, please? Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? 7-0. Paul. Thanks for catching up with myself and the council as we were over the other day. Things are looking good. Ready for this weekend, next weekend, the Barra, big Barra race. Yep. Great. Questions? I can more mausoleum and here whenever I ask anyone for any questions. I'm not sure what's going on. 372. Vet recovery. Paula.
Just seeking council's permission to write off some old debt there. It's been on the debt list since about 2018 or 2019. So, yeah, just the report speaks for itself there.
Questions for Paula's report? Do I have a mover?
So the panels were not returned. And that's why the extra cost has, they were used or not used, but not returned. That's what the additional.
They were charged out over a period of time because they stayed on the footpath
Yeah.
for so long. But they were returned, I believe. It's outstanding mark. So I don't have all the inside information either. Anyway, go.
If it's defensive.
Yeah, I understand that, but it reads like there was an initial period that was paid
Paid up front.
for X amount of time, and then the panels were there, but maybe not used, but not returned, and that's generated the extra cost.
Do I need to close the meeting?
You, Mr Mayor, probably preferable.
I asked to close the meeting because of the reason that we need to discuss something that may. Well, it's debt recovery, so.
Confidential, no. Formal agreement, no. That's okay.
C, 254J3C, affecting the local government's budget. Do I have a mover? Councillor Plum, seconded. Councillor Arthur, those in, why is People's out of the room? He's not.
It's smacking, Mr Mayor.
Good afternoon, Munchie.
While we're still on camera.
Those in favour? Carried 7-0.
Lands to the access point. So the goal of this configuration is going to be that I'm going to have an SSID that is going to be Corp, and then another SSID is going to be called Guest. So my goal of this configuration is that everyone that connects to Corp needs to get this.
Does not.
I thought you meant add.
No. No. Councillor Peoples, second. With the additional reasoning being added, as Debbie has noted, that the recommendation did not propose that.
Align with our current debt.
Not relevant to council.
Current approach, yep. Current approach for policy either way. There's all the same intent. I think we're on board. Those in favour of the motion? Against? 7-0, carried. Good by Councillor Gleeson. Every meeting. Look out far. Right. Thoughts? Recommendation here, the report's pretty clear in this case. Well, it was clear in the last case, so it's probably clearer here.
So again, this is about debt recovery, not agreeing to an in-kind.
Yeah, so that is correct. Is this an invoice that has not been paid? Is it correct? Yeah, sorry, but for a charge that has not been paid, yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think it's very similar to our previous item. It's a debt recovery. It's not a request for a grant or in-kind support. So what do we?
The method, yeah, the reasoning that's given here, I don't understand. What are they saying? Why some clubs are charged for water usage and some are not? What does that mean? Does anyone know?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so, is that because does the Camp Drivers Draft Association use a truck, like a council truck, to water the yards, whereas say the cricket arena is just watered out of taps? You know what I mean?
Is it for a council truck? I don't think it is. I think it's actual water charges where someone's gone to the spout and filled it out. Isn't that right, Jenny?
That it's correct.
It's literally just the water. It's a private truck doing the carting.
Mr. Mayor, I'd say he's sort of comparing football oval gets watered for football, don't pay any charges for the use of football oval for water. Are we correct in saying that, Jenny?
Tim Smith, that is correct, but that field is also used for multi-purpose. I think the clubs are referred to are the race course and the oval. So yes, the race course track is specific and horses can run around it, but the oval is not. So there's more than just the league, there's touch, there's cricket, there's school sports. So all those people would have to be charged, but they're not going and taking it from a standpipe as such, which is the accountable water.
I can understand his point, but when do we charge for water in the rec park? So I can understand Tom's point, very well, the club. You know, there's only a
If I'm going to use for
Are they going to meter the water that goes into the tank that they've put there? It's Councillor Plum's. Because they bought a tank and put it at showgrounds. She's wondering whether are they going to meter that? And who's paying for that?
Three years there. If they were to water the arena just with the hose from the showgrounds, it wouldn't cost anything because it'd be the same as the hoses that are coming out, but because they're going to the standpipe to get it, it's needed. That's why it's a bit of
To Ms. Mayor, and sprinklers do go on that camp draft arena at different times, so they're not charged for that. The water that this is in relation to is the water that they take for an event that they hold. So I guess we look at it, the league that don't use water for an event, water a field. I guess I'm just answering the question you had about why they're comparing to different fields. The response to that is they don't utilise the water.
Well, I get and probably even agree with the fact that they shouldn't be charged, to be honest. I don't see the point in charging them when all they're doing is stopping the town getting covered in dust. But what I struggle to see here is the refusal to pay the invoice. Like, the group, knowing what they know, probably should have asked council, can we get the water? Is it okay in advance rather than not paying the bill and protest? That it's the process that's not being followed here. I think Councillor Arthur, you're sharing my concerns there as well. Is that right?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, the infrastructure is not there, and that's, I guess, part of the council and part of the community group, where they need to go outside of their area to get water to utilise. Hopefully a simple fix is what the Camp Draft Association is doing now. They've got a grant for a tank so that they can fill. I would assume that if the water's filled there on site, and if they then put it into a water cart, they're not paying for the additional water in the tank over
Well, nobody
there. Which is, again, no different to the watering of the oval, the showgrounds, the green spaces over there.
We've that tank that was filled with the wastewater.
Yeah.
Pipeline as well, so it won't be.
Yeah. Might be drinking water. Just. That's right, it's
Has
unfortunate
there been an approach
beforehand or in
previously in any way to see whether they could have the water free of charge? That anyone's aware of?
Really, Mr. Mayor, I feel like this has come up before. I think it was like probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'm sure that I've heard, councillor Gleeson asking about that water. And, yeah, have they actually asked for access to the water before and got approval for the event?
Oh,
I
It's a pretty substantial amount.
And like you said, it was done before the event, not after.
In answer to that, I'm just looking at some information. In 2017, there was the University of Water, and I can see where it has been out saying the council approved a donation. So that was back in December 2017.
Yes.
$414.
And although I know it says in there that some donations were made to community groups, I would strongly encourage community groups to pay their council bill as part of their donations back to community.
It's an interesting one. I genuinely don't think they should pay for water for dust suppression, and they're not profiting from it. It's helping the town. It helps the event. It's no, like whether, I understand that metaphorical difference between a football field not being, the football field needs A, a lot more water, and B, if it's not water, they can't play football on it. So it's immaterial to me that. I just don't agree with the process that the club's used here to seek the waiving of it. That to me is it's confrontational. If they've had a history of knowing that bill's coming and have previously asked for council to waive it as they did. So the only difference is that the most recent invoice they issued, 2017. So I'm just wondering what's happened in the intervening years. I mean, is it as simple as the truck driver just hasn't filled out the log, so they've taken the water? Because they've run a number of events in 17. So is this just the first time that a really conscientious truck driver, once again, which is immaterial, but it's not really like...
And through you again, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, that's the mechanism that we have. That if extra water is needed through the standing pot, then that comes at a cost. And ideally, the community group approaches council beforehand and says, can you waive it? Or can we have the $500 and we'll put that back towards it, or in kind, or...
Well, possibly, councillor, and even I'm not perhaps as quite as strong on you, even if they forgot to do it previously and wrote to us when they got the bill and asked, look, sorry, we should have done this. This is a debt recovery resolution. That's a big difference.
It's a completely different kettle of fish to
It's a big difference. And we've got to be careful about a double standard here. Now, I know the point about, I just think this is the wrong mechanism for them to be using. I don't agree that they shouldn't be paying it either. That's the quandary I'm in. I definitely don't think they do, because I think it's be inconsistent with our support for community groups in kind, and it certainly doesn't cost us $182. But they didn't stop. Yeah, there was subsequent water use, that's right. We're talking two different events here. It's tough, like they shouldn't have to pay it, but when they don't ask for it to be paid and it's just sitting there as a debt.
Mr Mayor, in line with the previous item, I'm against writing off the debt.
Councillors, others?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I agree with Jan in this case. We just, in the previous motion, not allowed this, so I don't think they should have to pay for the water either, but I think, can we let them know that they need to contact us before an event and ask for the water, so that it's already, organised, and we don't need to invoice them. But yeah, I think that I would not agree with writing off the debt.
Councillor Peoples?
Mr Mayor, I'm totally against charging any of our clubs for water for their events. And I don't know, when you talk of setting precedent, if we're going to make this club one of the start to use of water before an event, does that mean every club's got to open its marks to use of water? I'm totally against any club use. We haven't paid for water.
Councillor Hanson?
I'm against charging them for water, but I believe this shouldn't have come to us as a debt recovery, but more as an in-kind donation. I am against charging for water. I'm not sure why this has come to us as a debt recovery.
Councillor Arthur, I know where you are on this.
Mr Mayor, I agree with you. They shouldn't be charged for the water, but under the current mechanism that council has in place, the infrastructure hasn't been there, isn't there, and the Campdraft Association know full well that they need additional water. Another option would be to park a water cart over there and let it fill up overnight and then use it. They wouldn't pay for the water then, but then the water cart's not getting used by somebody else, so that's a cost on whoever donates that. And there's other avenues so that this doesn't happen before it gets to this stage. And from what I understand, that once the tank and the pump goes in there and is serviceable, then it's highly likely not to happen again, that they will have to use the standby water.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that. It's only a 10,000 gallon tank of water. 15% of that arena, it won't. Crazy small. It's not.
Well, do we need to look at, over the budget process next couple of years, putting more storage there, or better dust suppression, or sprinklers, or?
Yes to all of that. But I'll come back. You've raised some points. Councillor Plum, you haven't had much on this one.
The Campdraft Association had a campdraft in May, so were they charged with water fee for that? They had 2 campdrafts in the radio last year.
They look to have been charged for the last 2, not the first one.
So they've obviously been charged for the rodeo and the September campdraft. Would it be May?
First invoice was for April to September, and the second invoice was
April to September, so that would be 2 campdrafts, and then
Yeah.
the third invoice was for
Or one camp draft in the first one, I'd say, look at the volume, and then the camp draft and the radio in the second one. So what's your thoughts, Councillor?
Oh, no. If they didn't put the grounds over there, your campers would be up and armed for them, because of the dust for it. So it's a necessity that they will be open. It's probably a safety issue as well. So I don't believe that. But
Who instigated the follow-up here? Let's walk through the process here. They were issued invoices which they didn't pay. But then paragraph 2 of the document says that they wrote to council. So did council instigate follow-up other than just sending invoices, or did they say, look, we don't really want to pay this for this reason, and that's why this resolution's come to us?
That's every month, whoever's outstanding with their debt gets a letter, and then the letters progressively give a little bit more forceful, I guess you could say. And then we received, council received a letter in December. And yeah, that's how it's come about. Now then I received an email last week, so that's why I'll put it.
If they had that previously, if they had those events from 17 through to 21 and weren't charged, was there an understanding they didn't have to pay for it?
Yes, I have taken a note to ask why. But unfortunately, I think finding manual recording in that standpipe
It's an honest decision at the standpipe. But they're not going to achieve how much more they take. So, truck drivers.
And there's other sources, isn't there? They can go to the hole and come out of the hole, maybe they can.
So, councillor. Fully aware of that, that's why I'm asking your opinion.
Look, as I said before, they didn't wet the grounds and the dust went all through the cricketers on the table, there'd be a bit of a rage. If someone had a bus around their horse due to the sawdust and damming down,
Can I just ask, and following on the advice from Paul, Brett, is this still technically the correct procedure to be discussing this issue? Is it debt recovery? Is that what it is?
To me, it's really great.
Post-event, admittedly, but it's... Councillor Rogers, which...
I feel like they need to snare. I think we should give them the water, like from now into the future, like they shouldn't have to pay for the water. So there has to be some sort of understanding that in an event they can use the water from the standpipe without having to, or even if they do, they have to log the amount, but that for that event it's not charged. I'm just not sure what we can do about debt recovery now because it's already been used and invoices issued, so.
Using an edge switch that can have a separate, like a number of the ports can be a totally different. Let me fix this. I don't want to confuse everyone here.
So, Mr. Mayor, what?
ETH1. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is adding a VLAN off of ETH1. I'm going to make it VLAN ID 30, which means it's going to be ETH 1.30.
Work that out. I know a fair bit about this.
And I'm going to give it an IP address of 10.10.0.1/16. So this is going to be a full class B that I'm going to be adding into my network here. Okay, so that is then, of course, plugged into port 1 of my edge switch. I have a 24-port edge switch Lite. But these same concepts work if you have the PoE version, the 48-port version, I think even the Tough switch, which I have behind me. So I'm going to take 2 ports out of my 24 ports, ports 19 and 20, and I'm going to make those ports the 10.10.0.0/16 network. Okay, all of the other ports are still going to be 192.168.200, but just those 2 ports are going to be in the new network that I'm creating, and I'm going to add a DHCP server that hands out IP addresses on those ports. Okay, so hopefully that's clear, and let's get to the configurations. The first thing we need to do is we need to pop over into the Edge router. Here's my dashboard here, and we need to
as Jenny said before, they do use the travelling irrigators and so forth.
add our VLAN. So let's go ahead and add interface, add VLAN.
That's why
the VLAN ID is going to be 30. The interface is going to be ETH1. And the description, I'm going to say temp VLAN 30. And then we're going to give it an IP address. Select manually define IP address. And the IP address I'm going to give it is...
They roll, they get a roller, actually physically roller, which sets it off. And it does work. It's the water and roller at least once, maybe twice a day, depending on the weather. So I'd have to seriously go away and do some work, but I've done a lot of work on dust suppression issues for a long time for arenas like this, so I could calculate it pretty quickly in the right environment. This comes down to 2 things. Is this genuine debt recovery, fundamentally? And if it is, we approach it in that respect. Notwithstanding, I know you can do what you like, you can have your own individual opinions, but are we truly undertaking what we would genuinely, historically consider debt recovery? If we are, we view it like that, still can determine to go for or against doing it, or is this really a consideration of a post-event grant or support mechanism? That. And I think it does go a little bit of how we view it prior to making the decision does go a little bit of a way towards establishing precedent around how this arrangement works in terms of not setting a double standard within how we deal with these matters around debt recovery.
I'm not in favour of 3 years today. I'm not in favour of being classed as a debt recovery. I don't think it is.
Councillor Peebles.
I'll agree with that. Councillor Hanson I'm sure that I was why they got charged initially anyway, but charged. I know it's standpoint issue in the levy, but don't charge out from water, I don't think we should be charging the campground, so I'm happy for it to be either it's not a debt recovery or then some sort of post-event grant.
Councillor Arthur, I know this places you in a difficult position, but I think the process is what we need to get right here first before we worry about the decision. Because of the precedent matter. So where are you on? Is it in your mind debt recovery or is it a grant? Belatedly in a difficult and a roundabout way.
Well, if we're talking, it's going back to September last year, something.
Oh, yeah.
So that's 5 months. What are our invoice terms? 30 days, 28 days?
Yeah, but they did. They did right to us. So they didn't clear it in time. Somehow it's through. Address it straight away.
Right, so some of that is on us. Okay.
So the delay is not good.
That probably, sorry, Councillor Arthur, to cut you off, but that substantially changes it for me. If they corresponded previous to, say, last week, so if that wasn't their first attempt to communicate, I was thinking last week's leaving it a bit late when we've issued 2 invoices. I knew after they got the first one, the second one was going to be coming. But if they,
Wasn't before.
Geez, you're not helping everyone here. Sorry, Councillor. No.
Well, it'll be very difficult standing at a drop arena and you have to pay for the water and that's spraying people have their plenty to their competition, maybe.
But
I don't disagree with that. Sorry, Councillor Arthur. I don't disagree with that for 1 minute. And I don't disagree with Councillor Peebles. They should have been charged, potentially even charged in the first place, but they knew they were going to be.
Oh,
Because they had one invoice and then they've continued to use it for the next two events and didn't realise that there was obviously a disconnect between what council's operational activities were and what they viewed they should have been, and didn't bother to write and ask or even pick up the phone and ring one of us, even at a council level. That's where I've got the problem. I do not agree for 1 minute that they should pay. I vehemently do. We use 100 times more water than that for those other facilities. And not only in this town, in every other town gets the same thing. My problem is we're looking at this 5 months afterwards. Okay, so it's not 5 months when they first wrote to us, but I don't like the fact that council appears to be backed into a hard place here on a resolution that's titled debt recovery when we've just been very firm on an outstanding debt with a local ratepayer on something because we don't believe it fits with our policy. If this is a genuine debt recovery, I've got concerns about, then we'll feel for a community group that's doing a good job, running events, spending money in our towns, the opposite perhaps of the previous resolution. But
donating to other
exactly,
community organisations.
doing what we want community groups to be doing, it's difficult. But I would have sooner addressed this on their behalf when they were first made aware of the problem rather than now, because it appears that we are being stared down, and I just don't like being wedged into a place like this, especially I'm going to be blunt now, when one of the president of that committee is a councillor who understands council's processes quite well. We could have had the issue resolved a long way sooner than this with a bit more appropriate communication. Now, if we're wrong in process, we've got an opportunity to fix that as a council, but we don't know about it if we aren't told. So, anyway, Councillor Rogers.
I just think that because we've just, in the last motion, local ratepayer, we have not let them off, haven't written the debt out off. I know this is
Sorry.
different.
Yeah, my question to you is, do you see this as debt recovery though? Like the question I'm asking the council is, are we considering this in the right prism? Is this actually a belated community grant request rather than a genuine debt recovery?
That is probably
I apologise, I'm just going back through the emails. There was the issue that was raised after the Senator agreement was prior to the November invoice being issued.
Okay, so they did approach us when they received the first invoice. All right, well, to me, that means they've attempted to get the process addressed early enough that we could have interceded. So I'm happy, councillors, that we consider this as a community grant request. You can still be against it if you want to. I think it's inappropriate that we consider it as a debt recovery, given
Mr. Mayor,
the
because
time.
this is not a business owner. It's a not-for-profit community organisation that's asking to. It's not a business.
Mr. Mayor, the heading
Covers both steps.
the word rebate. To me, it was, even though the recommended resolution is via, the intention was that the council maintenance in rebate.
I just found it incongruent that we could have written off a debt with somebody that we will then continue to financially support with future, well, more than likely, because they're not an insolvent group or a rogue group. That's where I just didn't find any congruency between that. But then rebate also suggests to me that we'd be refunding something that's already paid, where this hasn't been paid. So, councillors, if we consider it in the light of its a request to support a community grant post incurring of the fee, where does that leave you in terms of what you want to do with the debt, with the outstanding payment? Councillor Blunt.
Just reason.
So totally wipe it, Councillor Arthur, if you change,
Even at a grant, Mr Mayor, the mechanism that we had at the time and that was used by the Camp Draft Association, if they knew full well if they got water out of the standpipe, that they had to pay for it, or they had to ask the council for a grant against it, doing it after the fact and us applying it retrospectively. I'm happy to not call it debt recovery, but yes, I don't appreciate the pressure that has been placed on council by not paying the bill. And I understand that we've dropped the ball by not dealing with it previously. But our community groups have really got to get it into their head that doing things retrospectively, it's costing us too much money that we're not budgeting for. And it's not that hard. Like council is very open to supporting community groups. And I agree with you. They shouldn't be paying for the water to start. We should have we should probably have the infrastructure. We shouldn't probably. We should have the infrastructure there so that those that use the oval, those that use the racecourse, those that use the campground get to benefit from our water. It hasn't been there. That's again on us, but it's also on the Campcraft Association. Have they petitioned council for, over the years, water storage over their irrigation systems? Like, there's grants galore that is something that could help the community group and the council that they probably could have accessed over the years. Yeah, but this is only for a tank that on the letter it says still won't be sufficient. So they probably need
more.
Yeah, but like we just had over at the showground, you've got to have a plan of what you want to be. You can't just expect everything to happen in 12 months' time. It might take 5 years to get to where you want to be. But council can't keep footing the bill until that 5 years. We will with some prior knowledge and some understanding. And there might be small things. If we had started the process 5 years ago, they'd have the tanks there now. But the community groups really need to talk to council about what improvements needed and how much they can fund and how much they need from council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I feel like what's happened is that I remember in 2017 it happened, we rebated that money or we let them off that water, and then we had an agreement. Like, I think there was just an agreement that they had access to the water without charge, because all the other groups get water without charge. But somehow, like Brett said, the truck drivers read the meter and I think it's probably been accidentally charged to the club. They've written one letter, but they haven't had a response in time before they've had the next event. I actually don't think that they need the infrastructure to, like the amount of water, they only have 3 events a year. It's probably much more efficient just with a water truck and the standpipes. Like,
there's a lot more events there than they hold. Like there's barrel races, stockman's challenges, working dogs at the show. That event is, or that group might have 3 events, but they have practice days. The pony club have practice days. So it's probably like some of them things probably happen and council don't even know about it, which is a problem in and of itself. But I'd suggest, Jenny, we don't always get told about everything that happens there. But the fact is the surface is used. So I think we could look further at that. Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, I'm not in favour of charging for the water, but I'm not in favour of being under debt recovery either.
Yeah. Councillor Rogers?
I think that we should just, in that motion, just add that until such a time that infrastructure allows them to have water there, that it's an agreement that they get that water, at events without being invoiced.
I think we might do it as a subsequent decision around a few different things. Councillors, I know there is potentially going to be alternative views to this. I know there's at least one, but I think the resolution should change then, in what I'm hearing, to that council agrees to waive the Barcaldine Campdraft Association's charge for water of $882. It's not debt recovery, so it's not a debt. Well, that just doesn't read right either, Brett.
Use.
Okay.
Yeah. Or even, but Campdraft Association bulk water charge of.
Yeah, that'll be good. That references exactly what it's for. Can I have supplementary notes typed here, please, Debbie? Explaining this. Due to information received in the meeting, councillors determined that the decision on this matter would change from one of debt recovery to community grants. Councillors? Even though you're possibly in disagreement to the motion, are you comfortable, Councillor Arthur, with that explanatory note?
Can we issue a grant if it's not in line with our branch policy?
We can override the policy. We can, council staff can't. It's like standing orders, we can just suspend them. But I'm happy that you could even review community grants to community group support, which is probably more appropriate actually. Probably just delete the S, please. I think that's probably reads better anyway. Does that reflect the change in conversation? Geez, I'm sorry, Paula, you've been railroaded on 2 of your resolutions this afternoon.
No.
Sorry?
No.
No, the resolution was that we did not, that we wrote it off. We overruled the officer twice.
Yeah.
You're going to drive home this afternoon, Councillor, be up for it.
We still want to try and.
No. Yeah, but it was the reverse of what the officer's recommendation was. Right.
Oh,
Do I have a mover? Councillor Plum. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hanson. Will there be any formal debate? Councillor Arthur?
No, Mr Mayor, I'll chew more time up. I've stated my case on. I'm still against granting the grant because if it had been done with the policy on the approved grant form in September, October, it wouldn't be an issue. We would have dealt with it by now, and there wouldn't be the. I don't know, I feel a bit of animosity coming from the Campdraft Association towards council the way it's ended up. There's a lot easier ways, and I appreciate that we've dropped the ball a bit. But community groups got to learn. They've got to just stop sending an email or ring the councillor and saying, "Oh, can we fix this?" We've got a policy in place. It's not a hard policy. It's quite a simple policy. It's a piece of paper.
Whilst my comment on this won't necessarily reflect my vote, I do wish to highlight Council's precedent in this decision and the fact that I anticipate this vote will go in the reverse of that, where a request for financial support or consideration of fee relief post an invoice being raised has been the request has been denied by Council as recently as only 2 meetings ago. So there is, it is Council's prerogative to make a decision on a case-by-case basis. However, should this resolution that Councillor Plum and Hanson have moved and seconded pass, it is in direct contravention of the prior decision where a request for fee relief was asked by a community group. So I do note the inconsistency and B, the very difficult position that this group, including the degree of animosity that Councillor Arthur refers to, has been levelled at Council and has obviously made this a very difficult decision because we've been on this agenda for quite some time. Any further comments? I now call the vote. Those in favour? Against? 5-1. Councillor Arthur.
Can I be recorded, please, Mr.
Councillor Gleeson can return.
Definitely gave him long enough to go to the restroom, Mr. Mayor.
Three seven four. Paula.
Just received an email last week asking if council would be interested in selling, or not selling, giving one thing. Lots 1 to 4. They're on the Porter Street and Paul Street corner, opposite the ambulance station in Arundel. To be used for government housing. We actually purchased the lots a few years ago from them. $9,000, and now they want.
For how much? And they want them back for free.
Leading to you.
Yeah, well, that's the way I read the word acquire, yes. My reading of your report was that they expect it for nothing.
9,000 each for the whole thing.
Councillors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've got a big question mark with the dollar sign next to it because there's no mention of remuneration for the blocks of land.
So let's go back a step. Sorry, I meant to ask a question here, Paula. We just recently sold a block in, or 2 blocks in Aramat. Or did we have one that didn't sell?
I just wanted to know one.
And what did that block in Aramat sell for? 4,000. And comparatively in size, what are we looking at per block here compared to that one that we sold?
Roughly the same.
Each block's roughly the same. So if I'm to do a very rough market analysis there, 2 of these blocks should be worth the same because they have bitumen street access, and 2 would be at a slightly discounted because they don't have sealed access. Would I be roughly correct? So this.
Mr. Mayor, 3 out of 3.
Sorry, 3.
One's
What?
2 of them.
So we'd have three at 4,000 to 12,000, and if I knock 1,000 off to be generous to the other block, they'd be asking to acquire $15,000 worth of property off us for nothing. Because even though we might have paid 9 for them, the market's now dictating that each block's worth more than the 9 we paid. So, yeah, I'm not against progress, but the state government wanting to get the land for free to go and build a $400,000 house.
If we were acquiring we would have to pay.
Yeah.
We would not just donate it to me.
Councillor.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if they did acquire these blocks, whether they paid for them or not, did they pay the rates or are we still expected to pay rates on them?
State government doesn't pay the rates.
So in other words, it's...
It is in our bundle,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. The budget is also implications, increased rate rates, but again, I've got a big yellow.
They will pay, sorry, they pay for it through.
Well, charges, they pay fees and charges, but they don't pay rates. So it becomes their land, so
Yeah.
state land's exempt. Well, I'm not against them wanting to invest in housing in Aramac. In fact, I'm pro it, but they've got to expect that we own it. It's an asset. We're giving it, to refer to your earlier conversation, we're gifting an asset. If anyone other than the state government come along and asks us to give them a block of land to put a house on, what would we say? You know, would we seriously just give them a block, build a house?
Unless it was for a business that employed 30 people.
Well, if you use that as your caveat, well, it is the state government. They employ a lot more than 30 in our region.
Yeah, but this won't be additional. Like if we would give someone industrial land and they built a business that created 30 jobs, then that's probably not a bad trade-off. But and they've got to realise they're going to pay a considerable amount of money to build 4 houses over there. An extra $15,000 shouldn't make or break the deal.
Well, if it does, they genuinely weren't committed to doing it. They were future-proofing and land locking. If they bought at $4,000 a block, plus if you want to discount one, I mean, do what you like, I don't care. But if you realistically at $16,000 if you value them all the same, if they bought at that, then there's actually no intention to build a house there in the first place. Would be my assessment. It's the cheapest part of what they'll have to do. Dead set the cheapest part. Councillor Peoples, your home community.
I'd hate to see that we don't get 4 new homes in Aramac because of $4,000 a block. To me, maybe there's some other way we could look at it. Maybe there's a, I don't know what, if they do eventually pull down the old hospital, if that's the way they're going to go, would they stop us a week? Probably also a,
Why not build a house, is it?
I've been thought about
Mr Mayor, that's only one my comments.
I thought they said one thing, but with, I think Paul might have suggested, why don't you use that local in place? No, we want to go.
I haven't spoken to Carlo again, but yeah, that's what I would have asked him, why aren't they using it?
Oh, okay.
So there, from another perspective, we applied to freehold land, free park, and so when that occurs, we will have to pay the state government to apply that land on the cover price.
Through you, Mr Mayor, can we use a barter system? One for the other.
If council's interested in proposals and change the resolution, so the council agrees to apply the lots. Or so council authorises the mayor and CEO to negotiate sale of land. Energy and public works.
Whether that be for cash or substitute.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Councillor Arthur.
Yes, I'm more agreeable to that. I'd be less against the idea if they didn't sell it to us a couple of years ago. Like, if they had given it to us so many years ago and it had cost us $200 for transfer of title or something, yeah, maybe. But
The hair stood up on the back of my neck when I read this one. This was the only, sorry, Paul, but this is one I didn't think was going to get through of the three. And it's going to, so you've done well.
Mr Mayor, can I also just add another area that you might investigate too, is that there's there is a state government out there that they don't use, and I think we could find out.
I have been investigating that. It's owned by QPS own their own houses.
QPS own their own house.
They're owned by the department,
Right.
by the police department, not Public Works. Goes back
These are only health and education.
Yes. in health and ed, in a lot of cases got out of housing quickly.
So it's only health and ed.
I don't see
It's only health and ed. If they want, I thought there must have been police in there for the 4 houses, but obviously you're wrong.
I just want you to note there, the choir has to go to sale. To negotiate the sale, sorry. I'm changing that because it's definitely going to be a sale of some type, whether it's an exchange or cash, or but there'll be a dollar for dollar comparison. We're not giving a menu. But CEO is correct. We could have to part with some dollars to acquire the Freedom Park, so you scratch mine, I'll scratch yours, good part for final.
should we say this possible sale? Because I know there is gossip too in the pipelines through other departments. They may want to build a precinct, continue with the precinct up there with, and take the fire brigade and the SES, possibly police force up to that top end of town, so they may also want to acquire that land.
That land.
Possibly.
I know the fire station's definitely, it's going to be the next fire station rebuilt in regional Queensland, so that's definitely
Yeah,
on
I think one of those to stay for it, so I haven't had anything official, that's just.
Either way, we'll be selling it to somebody. Oh, well, yeah, but maybe not to Energy and Public Works.
you're removing a lot of this. What did you say? This
Yeah.
sale of land in Arrowhead.
Yeah, they might do, because if there's any crossover, we may be able to find alternatives. Keep all the departments happy. Right. Councillor Plum,
Sounds good to me.
are you moving it?
Yes.
Councillor Arthur?
I'm happy, Mr Mayor, and I agree with Councillor Peoples that it would be small-minded of the department if $15,000 was going to scupper it, and I think we would be a lot more amenable to giving up $15,000 to secure 4 houses, but if we don't have to,
Yeah.
all the better.
So you're seconding that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Debate? There being none, those in favour, 7-0. 381. This time of the afternoon, Jenny, I really need you to read that sort of quote. Just not sure that I am the first one. Have you got anything you'd like to point out here?
But we said that the Fairport committee was very full praise of the facility that was offered up there. Some of them were amazed that it's looking like it is, considering it was only officially opened on the 18th of December. I think that was the Saturday. So they were very impressed. So I hope they put some of their comments out in their websites, Facebook posts and everything like that. Also, it's great to see these compliments coming through for our swimming pool facility. I haven't yet sent the letter to the managed by Hill letter because we don't just receive, that's a nice to receive in writing, we get lots of verbal comments when people are over there at different functions for different reasons, so it is great to see. The other thing I will mention is I did get an email yesterday from the people who are doing that relocation out here at the back of on Ironwood Drive. They had a first drop on the 5th of February where they actually got a total of 19 acts ear trapped and relocated to their property down near Jericho. So I did send some photos. I can shoot the email around if people want to see them in the trap and then when they're loaded up into their truck. Also, I'm sorry, I did write a note here as we're going through them, and it's in relation to the district manager of Alpha's report. He was talking about the Alpha Library. I would just like it noted that a thanks would go to, it's a thanks to the Barcaldine librarian who offered her assistance to actually go down and assist with some of the training and migration books and bringing some back that needed to be sent back to that library. So they're going to go down again on Thursday to do some more training and get the computers up and running. So that's very kind of her to have offered that assistance.
Thank you. Questions for Jenny? (382) Barcaldine Rec. Oh, so we move and receive the report. Councillor Arthur, second Councillor Plum. Those in favour, 7-0. Oh, sorry. 7-0. (382) Barcaldine Rec Park, please. So resolution hardly even needs supporting material. It speaks for itself. Councillor Bliss has been talking about this at a few meetings.
Mr. Mayor, I'm quite pleased to see that it has come as an agenda for us to discuss. The wording is almost identical to what I was anticipating. I think it'd be a good idea.
Councillor Plum.
Mr. Mayor, I think for this, I think it's just a step in the right direction.
Councillor Rogers.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think that if we can lease it out, that is the best best for us, especially if they upkeep the lawn and gardens in the immediate area. Of course, as long as we are able to do that.
Councillor Peters.
Yes, me, I'm in favour of leasing it out, but are you going to have some sort of, requirements on the lease of times open and things like that, or is it just going to be left up to whoever?
I think the intent here was to put it out as an EOI, find which one council thought was the best, and then work with them to develop that. So to identify a preferred supplier / leasing, and then work on the details of negotiation, which might look a little different to their EOI to make it more advantageous for council. So a little bit of let's just see what the community can provide us with a solution. Pick the one that's the closest fit to what council's intentions are, and then work with them. The CEO then works with them to develop a final agreement. Rather than us putting so much work, could be elements of what comes into this lease someone's prepared to do that we wouldn't think would be part of their, fair to expect. They might say, oh, we'll do that. So let's let the potential leasees provide us with the feedback, and then guide, let that, when we have a look at them, then as council will select a preferred team. Councillor Hanson.
I'm not for it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Arthur.
And just to clarify, our position is that it's a profit-generating lease, not a we're paying someone to look after lease.
Correct. They'll be responsible for inventory and
So they will be paying us. We won't be paying them.
correct. It will not be
Because we do have that reverse type lease. No, that's right. Yeah, I'm fine with an expression of interest, and then we can see what goes from there.
Okay. Do I have Councillor? Sorry.
I am.
I think Councillor Gleeson may have beaten you to the punch there.
I'll second this meeting.
If Councillor Gleeson didn't have his name on that, I think he wouldn't talk to me again for the rest of the month.
Thank you.
Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. Angela, 391. Can I have someone move Angela's report be received, please? Councillor People, seconded Councillor Gleeson. Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. Angela, your report.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we had a great response to the Australian Day Awards announcement. A lot of views and shares. Congratulations to our recipients this year, and we'll look to determine a date to actually present those awards. Just want to reiterate what Jenny has said about the Barefoot Queensland State Championships in the weekend. We had a great response from the barefoot competitors, the officials, talking about our facilities, but also how well our community assists here. So they were very pleased with the event. I don't think that's any questions.
Further questions for Angela? Hopefully we can get a few people to the Clean Up Australia Days that are happening around the area. Just note the reschedule for Aramac. It's actually going to be Saturday afternoon. All good? 392. Councillors, are you happy that this request goes through our budget deliberation process so that we can get some more detail and look at what we're in for and perhaps some more in-depth analysis of this? Angela, do you have anything to add to that? No? Those in favour of, a mover for the resolution, Councillor Arthur, seconded, Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried, 6-0. Just note for the record, Councillor Peoples left the room for something. Thank you. 393. Can I please move that council acknowledges these recipients? The seconder, Councillor Plum. As every year, we're not necessarily always blown away with the number of nominees, but we are always, as we go through their biography and the reason for the event or the person to be nominated, think, wow, that's such a worthy recipient, and this year was no exception. It's probably the only good thing about not getting too many event nominees or participants in 1 year is we save all the good ones so that we can keep handing them out instead of going in competition with each other, which is not meant to encourage you to not nominate at all, please do. My thanks to all of these people for what they do that makes our properties and family lives and community events so much better. And congratulations to those who've achieved highly in their own individual right as sportsmen and women. Those in favour? 7-0. 394. I ask that this be agended. Detailed letters have all come through. I believe that groups like the ICPA are integral to coexistence out here, whether it be providing funding themselves for improved pathways for academia or sporting within our small schools out here, and I mean Buckhall Estate school size as well as Muttaburra Estate school size, whether it be for the correspondence, which is a predominant focus of the ICPA. Their work that they do is instrumental in securing both federal and state government assistance for kids of all ages, as well as providing support mechanisms for parents and educators in regional areas. I have been exposed to the work of the ICPA literally all of my life. They are one of the few extremely apolitical organisations in the lobby world. They walk both sides of politics with absolute ease. They do such a fantastic job. I realise that this event is not in Buckhall, it's in Blackhall. However, I think whether this event was in Blackhall or it was in Esperance, if it was the national conference, it's worthy of this council's support for the work this group does on our behalf. So I would like to move this. Again, ask for a second. Now, is there any discussion around the amount or the resolution itself, Councillor Willis?
Mr Mayor, is $500 enough?
I think realistically, any dollar they get is valuable to them. You could easily make a case that an organisation like ours could give $10,000. But you could also say that for a local government like us, $500 is base. It's not necessarily core business, but I mean, I'm happy with any support because I believe, I mean, that's obviously the bargain basement price. Any support we give a group like this is welcome. They're grateful for. If we had written to them and said, look, we can't give you 500, but we'll give you 50, we would have got the same value thanks letter back from them. They're genuinely appreciative of the support. So I'm in the hands of the generosity of councillors as to how you want to move with the figure, but yes, I think 500 is a good starting point. Yeah, I'm ambivalent to the figure. Councillor Plum.
I'm not good personally. I think if it was been helping Buckhall, we'd probably do the same, given $500 plus so much in kind. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
I'm happy with the resolution as it stands, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. Councillor Arthur, I note from several hours ago that you had a question on that.
Yes. Well, there's one that popped up the other day when we were at Taramac. The workplace health and safety reports that have sort of fallen out of our agenda on incidents and can we have a look at revisiting, or why did they fall out of the agenda?
Which, sorry, the,
Health and safety report, have we,
Oh,
we were
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
being able to come back to Merrimack, right?
yeah.
Melinda, sorry, Councillor Rogers actually brought it up.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just due to our workplace safety officer taking up the role. So he's now our HR officer, but also doing safety. So I'll get that information is there. So I'll do those reports. Yeah.
And also, Mr. Mayor, the ability for us to use our recycled water from the sewerage, can we also, or is there an avenue to recycle or reuse or biocompost that cake comes out of the sewage?
Through you, man, there won't be much cake that will come in from the sewerage. There'll be probably half a barrel or so through the process. It's very, very minimal. The process that we're going to apply, it's going to be very, very minimal waste.
But what have we been doing with the last
Yeah, the stuff.
30 years ago that we've...
Yeah, I think there's a storage there.
Very
Why?
good attractions.
Why?
You, sorry, this is a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to reuse that on any fertilizer. Unit waste, you can't use it. But I can follow it through and just clarify that. Because I've asked the same question, why can't we fertilize plants?
Or even if it's used as a component in a composting that has to sit there for 12 months, like we've got marginal soils at best on the Sandhill Hill Park. Like any soil improvement for our green spaces and tree planting, and yeah, it is of benefit to all of us and the trees. Even if some of our members would happily see them removed and butchered. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my two questions.
So I started with Councillor Arthur, now I'm going to go to Councillor Peoples. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I've had a request from the aged care facility where there's possibility of some shade trees along the footpath.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. They can have 1 per 20 linear metre of asphalt frontage as per our tree management policy.
I was going to bring it up while I was on, but I led through the right.
How many would they like?
Just all I asked was possible shade trees along that street. I'm not sure what the street is. Neilbury, is it?
The northern side.
Duly noted as question unnoticed, councillors. Duly noted. Thank you very much. Councillor Plum.
No, I think
Councillor Rogers.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gleeson.
Mr. Mayor, question on that. Had a phone call from a resident in Jericho was asking about the Ristia cactus problem in the Jericho Common, and it hasn't been addressed, and he would like to have more information. Is there funding available? What can the council do about the Ristia cactus problem on the Jericho Common? Because it is totally out of control. Thank you.
ARA. CIA. Sorry.
So,
HARR.
it's
Oh, yes, isn't it? Harris.
HARR.
Like Harris.
couple of other risks.
Just not right.
Do you miss me into my report?
It is, yes. We get the spelling line question done. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it was the residents of the aged care facility, not the actual aged care facility, the residents of the aged care facility that approached me.
Wonderful. No more questions on those?
Thank you. Being closed, 4:26 PM.